News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
It's 1 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top story this hour, there's a new superintendent for the Salt Lake City School District, Elizabeth Grant. Today she was talking about one of the biggest issues the district is facing.
The drop in population in Salt Lake City, and so losing families, and the need eventually, I'm afraid, to close some schools.
Grant says the school board will be making some big decisions about those issues in the coming weeks and months. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. A mystery is growing in Houston after a man was found sleeping on a bench who'd been reported missing by his mother when he was a teenager 8 years ago. But police now say he was never missing, and it's not clear why the family's been lying about it. Here's ABC's Alex Stone.
Houston police say being missing is not a crime, and while they don't know why, now 25-year-old Rudy Farias and his mom allegedly made up an 8-year story about the then-teenager going missing. The disappearing is not illegal. Chief Troy Finner.
Here's a fact. He's a grown man.
But there are questions if Rudy's mother will be charged for making false police reports. So far, prosecutors have decided not to file charges. Alex Stone, ABC News.
Your money at this moment. The Dow Jones average still down on the day, 340 points, not quite as much as it was a couple of hours ago. The NASDAQ, though, down 107 points at this hour. And our KSL weather, we've still got some clouds around. That's next. KSL News Time 101.
We have enough people running around Broadcast House at 4 in the morning to field a football team.
Producers, reporters, the traffic team, and us.
This is Tim and Amanda.
Join us each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Are you or someone you take care of as their caregiver living with Alzheimer's disease? This study just might be for you. Consider participating in Athira's clinical trial exploring a novel repair and regenerative approach to Alzheimer's disease. Pantheon Clinical Research in Salt Lake City is looking for people with mild to moderate dementia, 55 to 85 years old. A consistent caregiver or support person is necessary for the conduct of this study. This study is a late-stage clinical study of an investigational drug for the treatment of mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. Pantheon Clinical Research has over 30 years' experience with clinical trials. They conduct their business with professionalism, efficiency, and integrity. Contact Pantheon Clinical Research in Salt Lake City today. Again, call Pantheon Clinical Research today at 385-281-0550. That's 385-281-0550. Or go to pantheonclinical.com. That's pantheonclinical.com.
It's game time, and you're in the locker room ready to take the field. Suddenly, you notice a player you don't recognize. He's wearing your team's jersey and he even knows your name, but you've never seen him before until now. Would you trust this stranger with your team's playbook? Because that's exactly how phishing scams work. The first quarter of 2022 saw the highest volume of phishing attacks ever recorded. Protect your business with the Les Olson Security Suite from Les Olson IT. Learn more about it at lesolson.com.
And we're live here outside the Perez family home, just waiting for the... And there they go, almost on time this morning. Mom is coming out the front door strong with a double-arm kid carry. Looks like Dad has the bags. Daughter is bringing up the rear. Oh, but the diaper bag wasn't closed. Diapers and toys are everywhere. Ooh, but Mom has just nailed the perfect car seat buckle for the toddler. And now the eldest daughter, who looks to be about 9 or 10, has secured herself in the booster seat. Dad zips the bag closed, and they're off. But looks like Mom doesn't realize her coffee cup is still on the roof of the car. And there it goes. Oh, that's a shame. That mug was a fam favorite.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Just nail the big stuff. Like making sure your kids are buckled correctly in the right seat for their age and size. Learn more at nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
Visit nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Maximize your energy savings with a new energy-efficient heating and cooling system from Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric today. Get up to $1,750 back and a free Nest thermostat when Yes buys back your old inefficient HVAC system. Expert technicians, guaranteed service, and flexible payment options are great reasons to call Yes today. The same people you know and trust, providing Utah with the same great service you've counted on for more than 45 years. Call now or visit theyesmancan.com for details, terms, and conditions.
The UACP
CPA supports certified professional accountants in Utah through ongoing professional education and leadership development for an ever-changing financial world. Find a CPA at uacpa.org.
Emergency traffic brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
Two big issues. One is eastbound I-80, a crash approaching 2300 East. Now, they have been able to get it moved out of that right lane and leaving only a left lane of traffic blocked. That's only one left lane blocked. However, delays are stop and go almost back to 7th East. And then we have the crash with possible injuries on northbound I-15 right in the heart of the valley. It's as you're approaching 2100 South. The HOV lane is blocked and right lanes are blocked. Traffic getting through in the center 3 lanes, but you have delays that are pretty solid back to 4500 South and growing. This is the place, Heritage Park. The place to learn, explore, and enjoy Utah history. Perfect for weddings, reunions, birthdays, celebrations of life, and more. Plan today at thisistheplace.org. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, partly cloudy today with a high of 93. We could see pop-up thunderstorms over northeastern Utah over the next 3 days. Temperatures rise toward 100 on Monday and Tuesday. And right now, it's 81 degrees, mostly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Today, the Pentagon announced plans to tighten controls of classified information. The changes, of course, come after 21-year-old airman Jack Teixeira leaked documents on a gamer chat room. The new plans include certain changes to physical security, among a host of other things, but protecting our nation's top secrets has to begin long before just that physical control. It has to start with something way beyond the headline, something like integrity or trust. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, looking after secret documents has always been a priority. It's become an even higher priority, especially within the Pentagon, following classified leaks of critical information. And we're really pleased to have joining us back on the program Ryan Vogel, Associate Professor and the founding director of the Center for National Security Studies and the National Security Studies Academic Program at Utah Valley University. He's also the founding co-executive director of the Intermountain Intelligence Industry and Security Consortium and has a rich history both at the Pentagon as a senior policy advisor in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And Ryan, welcome back to the show.
Always happy to be here.
So for our listeners, just give us a quick reminder of why we're suddenly talking a little bit more and a little more publicly about the security of classified documents within the Pentagon.
This is the latest in a string of undisclosed releases. So the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, ordered a review of these documents and processes and systems that were in place to see what the issues were, what the problems were, why are we having these kind of prevailing problems, and that report was issued today.
Yeah, and so as you look at that from Secretary Austin, obviously one of the big leaks coming out of an airman first class, who, of course, was using and sharing, really, it seemed just for a bit of bravado and a little street cred on a chat room called Discord, really started as a hangout for gamers.
Right, and this isn't the first time we've seen something like this. And one of the things that we really kind of learn from this and other instances like this is that security clearances are generally governed by trust in the people that we give access to those documents. We do a lot of work in trying to identify, the right people to give clearances to. But once you have a security clearance and you have access to that information, a lot of the trust in the system is really on that individual. And so you can imagine, when you're talking about millions of people, all you have to do is get that wrong a few times in order for it to be pretty catastrophic.
Yeah, and I think that is so important that we often don't think of it in those terms. We think, okay, you have to go through this process to get a security clearance, and but then once you have that, it really is that element of trust is such a big component to it. I know part of what Secretary Austin rolled out was really looking at bringing things into compliance with both kind of the intelligence community standards, but also kind of some additional oversight and tracking. Give us a little sense of that.
So a lot of it will be what we call SCIFs, the Secure Compartmented Information Facilities, or the places that you can view classified information. Those will be brought into higher standards. There will be more monitoring of documents, and hopefully they did indicate that there might be a new office that dealt with insider threats, and that really is looking at the people that have security clearances and whether there's anything that indicates that those people might be at risk of disclosing information that we don't want to be disclosed. So those are a few of the kinds of things, physical security, additional controls to ensure documents aren't being moved or removed improperly, that kind of thing. But again, I just keep going back to this. One of the difficult things in this environment is that if you do all those things right, the fact that you still have millions of people and you have to get it right 100% of the time is a real risk. I mean, it's just one of those things when you're dealing with classified documents. You're dealing with people, and people do things like this Airman First Class that they do things for reasons that you probably wouldn't have predicted or anticipated.
Yeah, and I think that's so important as you go down that whole path because, you can have you can have the system perfect in terms of transparency and accountability and all of that, and it only takes one to not only leak a classified document, which is a bad thing, but it might also impact our relationship with another country or with another military, and those things unravel so fast. I want to dig in just for a minute. You talk about these sensitive, compartmented information facilities. The SCIF is it's often referred to. We had this in the Senate when I was a chief of staff back there, and for us it was the clearance, and then no electronic devices going in or out, and it sounds like that's going to be part of it as well as maybe some additional focus in terms of what is brought into one of those SCIFs to make sure there isn't anything that's being taken a picture of or transmitted out.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I mean, one of the things that we learned back in, I think it was 2008, after the Manning and Snowden disclosures, was that there was a variety of ways that classified documents could be smuggled out or compromised in some way. There was also the Chinese infiltration of the Pentagon systems around that same time frame. And so as a result, most of the SCIFs already had these rules. You couldn't bring phones into those places. You certainly couldn't use flash drives or thumb drives or CDs or anything in government computers. So there was a real effort to try to prevent any kind of easy infiltrations into government systems. So I'm sure that's going to be, compliance with those things is going to be really enforced and reaffirmed in this process. But there might even be additional things that are identified as ways that could be compromising, and those will also be prohibited in those spaces. You just have to be really careful in those spaces because there's just, with modern technology, there's so many ways to access information that we have to be always vigilant.
Yeah. So important. And I want to go back to this idea that the estimate, I think, is about 4 million people have some sort of security clearance, which, again, is a big number, and it only takes one or two to really set off an international incident. Do we have too many people that have access to too many things? Are we overclassifying some things and we're losing some things that way? What's your sense in terms of who actually should be having access to a lot of these things?
It's a great question. I think we've even talked about this before on this program. I think there definitely is overclassification. There's a built-in incentive to overclassify rather than underclassify, just because when you're dealing with information and there's always a risk. You might just defer to the higher classification just to avoid that risk. So there is that problem. A lot of that 4 million, they're not cleared at a higher level. So, we've talked about this as well, but, the basic level of classification is secret. And, there can be damage to the United States if there are secret documents that are disclosed like that. But really what we're worried about are the top secret or even the program, the more highly classified documents getting out there. And that is a smaller number. It's still a very large number. But as always, the issue that we're dealing with is we want people to be able to do their jobs. They need the right information to do their jobs. It's just that information is extremely critical and potentially very damaging to the United States if it's out in the public sphere when it's not supposed to be.
Yeah, and it really does come full circle back to where you started, Ryan. That is this whole issue of integrity and trust. And regardless of what the behavioral external forces are, it's still going to be that internal integrity and trust that we have to be able to trust people and to develop a culture of integrity and trust to really maintain those things that are vital to our national security interests.
That's right. And I'll kind of close with one thing. There's been a lot of conversation, and I think that this might be the direction we're going in. Since this system is so built on people and the trust that we have in people, this process that we've done over the years of reviewing people's security clearances every 5 years is really a kind of an outdated concept. You know, we have other things that are out there, credit scores and, you know, other kinds of ways of reviewing people's statuses on a more regular basis that ought to be applied in the realm of security clearances as well. And I don't know exactly what that will look like. It surely will require, you know, some manpower if we're to do it right. But since we're talking about something that's so important to, you know, to the country and to our allies and to the world, I think we need to do it right. A system based on people, we need to have a process that's very people-oriented.
Yeah, that process absolutely matters. Ryan Vogel, Associate Professor and the Founding Director of the Center for National Security Studies and the National Security Studies Academic Program at Utah Valley University, also founding Co-Executive Director of the Intermountain Intelligence Industry and Security Consortium. And Ryan, as always, we appreciate your perspective in this really crucial area. And I love the fact that it does come back to, one, how are we doing this? What's the process? And the people, and getting to those principles of trust and integrity. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Always happy to be here.
Well, as we always talk about it, you can talk about behavior all you want. You can talk about systems that control behavior, whether that's camera systems or magnetometers or surveillance systems. And yet, still, it comes down to the fact of integrity and trust. So it's principles. And those principles are the things that actually should drive behavior. We got to figure out the best way to make sure we're creating a culture around integrity of trust in order to really have institutions that the people can trust.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. The first half of 2023 was nonstop.
The rain and snow keeps falling.
Crews are working on Immigration Creek.
Lori Vallow Daybell.
Guilty on all 6 charges.
Congressman Chris Stewart to step down.
Join us for what comes next. Get breaking news from Tim and Amanda mornings 5 to 9. Go deeper with David Dujanovic at 9 and Boyd Matheson at 1. And drive home with Jeff Kaplan from 3 to 7. The news won't slow, and neither will we at KSL News Radio.
Are you ready to go for gold? Reach gold tier checking status. Open a checking account at Hercules First Federal Credit Union and qualify for gold tier status within the first 90 days, and they will deposit $200 into your account. All you have to do is mention that you heard this on KSL News Radio. You'll get all the benefits that go with gold tier checking. Ultimate ID, identity theft protection, travel benefits, cellular care coverage, health and wellness saving, family benefits, Ticket Express, and a host of others. All you have to do is sign up for e-statements, maintain an average balance of $1,500, perform some debit card transaction, 10 of those. And again, within that first 90 days, you'll get $200 deposited into your account. It's time to go for gold. You can reach gold tier check status with our friends at Hercules Credit Union. You can check out their locations in Taylorsville, Harriman, Riverton, or Salt Lake City. Or as always, you can visit our friends at Hercules Credit Union and at HerculesCU.com. That's HerculesCU.com.
Interest rates have gone up for buying a home, but not for remodeling the exterior of your home. This week only at RGS Exteriors, it's our zero interest financing sale. That's right, 0% interest on any gutters, siding, windows, or any exterior remodeling project on your home. We have programs for 12, 18, and 24 months, all with 0% financing. But the sale is this week only at RGS Exteriors. Want stunning James Hardy siding? 0%. Need to replace your windows? 0%. New gutters or gutter covers? 0%. How about a full extreme makeover? That's right, 0%. We've also been serving Utah for 5 generations, so you can trust us to do the job right. All work is backed by our exclusive 10-year everything guarantee for total peace of mind. And this week only, everything is available for 0% financing with approved credit. Don't put off your new exterior project any longer. As always, estimates are free, so call RGS Exteriors at 801-280-3110 or visit us at rgsutah.com. That's rgsutah.com.
Men who have given up in their intimate life because of prostate issues, testicular cancer, or simply no ED treatments you've tried have worked. It's not the end. At Summit Men's Health, they have a customized approach for each individual patient to get results they desire and deserve. Stop wasting your time and money with treatments that don't work for most men, like Shockwave, Viagra, or the shots. Summit Men's Health guarantees results in your first visit, or you don't pay. Call Summit Men's Health today and get the spark back in your relationship. Summit Men's Health, 435-500-2790. They're so confident this will work for you, they promise if you don't get results on your first visit, they pay you $500 cash, no questions asked. Call Summit Men's Health today at 435-500-2790. That's 435-500-2790 to get the passion back in your love life.
Emergency traffic on KSL News Radio, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. 2 hot spots on your Valley freeways. A crash eastbound I-80 approaching 2300 East is still blocking a left lane of traffic, and you have stop-and-go delays almost back to 7th East. Then northbound I-15, we had a crash with possible injuries prior to 2100 South. They've opened up most lanes of traffic. It's only the HOV lane now blocked northbound I-15, but we still have solid stop-and-go delays back to 5300 South. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Any Hour Services can make sure your AC keeps you cool this summer. Whether you need a tune-up, repair, or just a second opinion about replacing it, call Any Hour Services or visit anyhourservices.com.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, the Salt Lake City School District has a new superintendent. She's saying the district will have to look at eventually closing some schools. Second, the Great Salt Lake has probably hit its peak for the year, 5 feet higher than it was last summer. And third, it's not a crime to go missing in Texas, so police are wondering why one family's been lying about their missing son for the past 8 years. And right now, 81 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
One senator's causing a lot of drama right now on Capitol Hill, could be causing a whole lot more in the coming days. Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville has been blockading military positions that require Senate approval. Now, this is a tactic that senators from both the left and the right have used on a wide variety of things, from military appointees to judicial nominations, as a way to try to make a point or to hold out for a particular vote or something coming out of the White House. We're entering a new phase here. Next week, top Pentagon officials will start retiring. And if Senator Tuberville continues his course of action, there's going to be no one who can replace them. So we want to get into the details of this beyond just the headlines. Where are we? Where do we go from here? Really thrilled to have Paul McCleary, who covers major defense programs and acquisition policy for Politico, joins us. And Paul, thanks for joining us. Great piece today on the political hostage-taking of the senator from Alabama. But for our listeners, just give us a little of the backstory in terms of how did we get to this point?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Essentially, Senator Tommy Tuberville opposes the Pentagon's policy toward abortion policy. He wants the military to not provide any sort of services or funding or anything like that for service members to have abortions. And in order to overturn this policy, he's put a blanket hold on all military nominations. So there's about 250, maybe a little bit more now, high-ranking military officers who are stuck, who cannot be promoted to the next grade, cannot move on to the new job, cannot move to the new duty station under this policy. And now that some of the Joint Chiefs have already started retiring, their replacements are taking over the job as performing the duties of. They're going to go through their hearings, but they won't get a full Senate vote, which means they won't have all the powers of the Joint Chiefs of Staff would normally have. They could still do the job, But they're getting somewhat curtailed, and they're not Senate approved, which is a big problem. And it's a pretty unprecedented situation for something to go on this long and have this much of an impact at the highest levels of the military.
Yeah, no question. And for a lot of our listeners who aren't following this closely, I don't know that a lot of us realize that so many of these promotions to these senior positions in the military, that they do have to have Senate approval. And so the fact that there are some 250, and I want you to dig in just a little bit there. You talked about they couldn't go to their new station. So if someone was being advanced or given a rank advancement, taking over a new position somewhere, they can't even move their family. They can't move and get set up and ready to go in that new position. You also kind of end up with that acting commander or acting leader situation that's not good for morale or for building culture within the military.
Exactly, yeah. And some of this, I mean, the actual number is much larger than the 250 or so folks that I mentioned, is because, you know, the Marine Corps, General Berger, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, retired a few weeks ago. So General Eric Smith took over. He was not approved by the Senate, but he went through his confirmation hearing. He was nominated by the president. So he's the acting Commandant of the Marine Corps. He was the Marine Corps' number 2. So now there's no Marine Corps number 2. And then whoever's going to take that job, whoever's going to take the job after that, and after that, it's an effect, a cascading effect through the ranks. I mean, this is affecting the Naval Academy Commandant. This is affecting, I mean, everything all the way down. I mean, I know there's the leader of the 3 MEF, this Marine unit in the Pacific, about 48,000 Marines. That position is being held up. So it goes all the way down. And then, as you said, some families can't move. You know, they can't go to their next duty station. And officers get promotions as they get promoted, you know. So some of them are losing out on pretty big raises, you know, and things that they counted on for their families and their retirement and things like that. So, and Senator Tuberville doesn't look like he's anywhere near lifting his hold. I mean, this is going to continue. And the Senate is gone for August. They take the August recess. We got about 3 more weeks here for something to move, and if nothing moves, we're into September, October before anything starts to change.
Yeah, the ripple effect is really staggering when you start moving down to each of those levels. And you also mentioned that August recess where no one's going to be in Washington, D.C. Everyone will be in their home states. And getting into that and then into September, take us up the food chain and talk about how this is going to impact those at the highest level, at the Joint Chiefs level.
Well, the Joint Chiefs will have acting Army, Navy, Air Force, and chairman of the Joint Chiefs, which is now General Mark Milley. It's going to be most likely General C.Q. Brown from the Air Force. He's been nominated by the president. He has his hearing next week before the Senate Armed Services Committee. They can still hold the hearing. They'll probably vote him out favorably to the full Senate, but then there'll be no vote. So he won't be able to take the job. Which means the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs Admiral Grady will take over the job, and he'll be chairman of the Joint Chiefs is the president's senior most uniformed military advisor. It's a very serious position. And then you have General C.Q. Brown. I'm sorry if this is getting convoluted, who's head of the Air Force now, who is going to take over the chairman of the job. He will have to stay as Air Force chairman because he can't take the top job. So that means that whoever is nominated to replace him is also going to have to wait. So you have those knock-on effects too. So it doesn't have a real serious impact. You know, I mean, some people can do the jobs. The work will get done. But the new leaders of the services can't issue new planning guidance. Right? They can't start putting their imprint on the force.
Yeah.
And that will have a big impact further down the road.
Yeah, I think that is the real issue with all of this is that, especially at a time like this, security-wise, internationally, this isn't a time for acting leadership. You have to have the real person in the job. So as you said, Paul, they can get into that planning phase. They can put their imprint on the culture and the strategy and all the things that they want to have in place as they move it forward. And you can't do it. It's sort of like being the substitute teacher. If you're only there for until the replacement comes in or the real person gets approved by the Senate, that is not good for morale. That is not good for culture. It's not good for strategic planning. It's not good for the security of the United States. Paul McCleary, great insight on all of this and how one senator can hold and have a ripple effect through our entire military. Great perspective, great piece at Politico. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
We'll step aside for a quick break. More Inside Sources coming up on KSL News Radio. We'll be right back.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. Now that Republican Celeste Malloy is qualified for the ballot to replace Congressman Chris Stewart, the debate over her voter registration may result in some changed laws in Utah.
I do think you will probably see the legislature this next session going back and making one change, which is giving political parties 2 candidates that will come out of their conventions if they have a special election.
That's Utah House Speaker Brad Wilson, who says there's been some contention with the Republican Party over the state law that says parties can only send one person to a special election ballot. Tooele County has decided not to open the Energy Solutions Aquatic Center this summer. The pool has some significant damage. A news release from the county says there's not enough time to repair it before the end of the summer. It'll be installing some upgrades for pool users in time for next season. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Meta says about 30 million people have signed up for its new service called Threads over just the hours since it's been launched. It's designed as a direct competitor to Twitter. Dan Ackerman's a technology reporter with Gizmodo. He tells ABC News the app is user-friendly, though there might be some room for improvement.
There are some pain points right now. You can't direct message somebody. You can't follow just the people you're following in chronological order. It gives you kind of this algorithmic feed of a lot of different things. Search is very limited. That said, it's the first 24 hours, and I'm sure a lot of these features will be coming if they can convince people to continue to come over from Twitter, and they want to serve that audience really well.
And your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average, down 360 points, which is not where it was earlier. It's recovered a little. And the NASDAQ is down 117 points right now. Our KSL weather, we've got some clouds this afternoon. Not impossible. We'll see another rain shower or two. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:32.
Start your days with knowledgeable, friendly voices telling you about the latest news and weather out there.
Hi, this is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
In the business of waking you up each morning from 5 to 9.
On KSL News Radio.
Are you finally ready to lose the fat for life? Imagine the new you and feeling good in your body without the discomfort and even pain from the excess weight. Get a free consultation today at Revive Men's Health here in Salt Lake City to assess your health and discuss if their safe and effective weight loss treatment with semaglutide is a good fit for you. They offer treatments for men, couples, women, or anyone who may need support in their weight loss goals or who may benefit from semaglutide support with pricing up to 60% less than the name brand medications. They also offer comprehensive DNA-based testing to help you understand your metabolism to make sustained weight loss, better performance, and fitness a reality. Join our satisfied patients who are maintaining substantial weight loss. Call Revive today and book your free consultation. Men, women, and couples are all welcome at Revive. Book your free appointment today, saving you $199. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
Hi, Doug Wright, and let's talk about your barbecue. And let's talk about your barbecue skills. Maybe that old barbecue of yours was buried under the snow and you're just now in the process of getting it functional again. Now, we know you grill a pretty mean steak, but how about if we just all relax? It's July. We've been doing a lot of celebrating lately. It's time to get into Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Why not let them grill the perfect steak for you and for your family? Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, they have 2 locations, Hotel Park City and, of course, downtown Salt Lake City. A lot of people like to kind of mesh things together. They're going to a ball game, going to a movie, or they're going to go up hiking in Summit County in the Park City area. Well, they make the reservation for that evening at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, and you're going to have the best steak you have ever had. And the desserts, the side dishes, the other entrees too. It's Hotel Park City and 275 Southwest Temple in downtown Salt Lake City.
You heard the call of spring and went to town planting your yard and garden. Everything's in, not too shabby, but you still could use a little help. After all, when you dress things up, it's the little things that zero in on the oohs and ahs, like a nice top dress. No, not the one with those expensive shoes in your closet. Top dress as in compost, bark mulch, and decorative rock for your just about beautiful yard. Oh, and by the way, with 2 to 3 inches of that covering, you help keep the weeds out, save water, and keep the plants cooler. So how do you put those finishing touches together? You call the Dirt Bag. The Dirt Bag makes dressing up your yard so much easier. They'll deliver your bag of bark, mulch, or decorative rock right to your driveway. They'll also deliver loose product in bulk. Or you can pick it up if you like just west of Mountain View Corridor at 6054 West, 9790 South in West Jordan. This is one Dirt Bag you'll love. It helps save you money and time. Order your bag now at thedirtbag.com. That's thedirtbag.com.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's High Yield Savings Certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
And we do have emergency traffic that continues due to a crash eastbound I-80 at 2300 East. The left lane is blocked. You do have solid delays back to 7th East. We're seeing big improvements with the clearing of the crash northbound I-15 before 2100 South. However, we still have residual delays into Murray and also a vehicle fire northbound I-15. It's going to be about 4 miles prior to Santaquin in Juab County. Expect some possible delays. The Utah Symphony's Deer Valley Music Festival in Park City features Ben Folds, Leanne Rimes, the Beach Boys, and more. June 30th through August 4th in Park City at DeerValleyMusicFestival.org. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, partly cloudy today with a high of 93. We could see pop-up thunderstorms over northeastern Utah during the next 3 days, and temperatures will rise toward 100 on Monday and Tuesday. And right now, 83 degrees, mostly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
There's an interesting shift happening in U.S. demographics. Utahns have noticed that more and more people from California are moving into the Beef High state. And on the flip side, Americans across the country have watched as people from Florida or Texas or other red states have packed up and moved into blue states. It's called the Big Sort. We want to get into what's driving it. What does it tell us about our polarization when it comes to our politics? And more importantly, what does it tell us about what we need to do moving forward as a society? Nick Riccardi is a Western political writer for the Associated Press based in Colorado. I had a great piece about this very thing of where people are moving and why. And Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Bud.
So let's start with just kind of the basic definition of the big sort. What is it that we're actually seeing when it comes to people moving in and out of red states and blue states?
Sure. The big sort is a term that was coined really over a decade ago in 2011 to describe how Americans are kind of clustering in like-minded communities politically, demographically, but particularly politically. And so that's been happening for a while for a wide range of reasons, part of which is that the political parties are kind of splitting on ideology, and those ideologies run through certain demographic groups, particularly like college graduates who tend to move where the college graduates are. And so if all college graduates start voting the same way, they're going to be surrounded by people who vote like them. So that's been going on for a while. And then what appears to have happened, there's kind of limited data on this, but the pandemic seems to have made some of this implicitly in this big sort. People were kind of moving based partly on politics, but it wasn't, they weren't saying it. It was, I want to move somewhere that's got, I want to be in a big city with lots of cultural amenities. Okay, that's Democrat. I want to be in a place that's clean with a lot of space and my family feels safe. That's Republican, right? Yeah. So, people weren't thinking, I need to go to a red state, I need to go to a blue state. Now, a lot of people seem to be prioritizing the political color of the state. It really has, it really does seem to be moving up the ladder in terms of reasons for people moving. And, part of that is the pandemic, which both freed a lot of people to relocate. Mm-hmm. Particularly, it freed a certain class of people, right? The remote workers, usually college-educated folks who tend to be the most politically kind of engaged and polarized. And it also kind of drove home to people the importance of living in a state. As one person said in the story, a lot of people have kind of ignored state politics for a long time, but then the pandemic created this huge illustration of the power of the state. And if a state can tell you whether or not your business can stay open, or you can go to church, or your kids have to wear masks at school or can attend school, you probably want to make sure the state you live in complies more or less with your worldview and values.
Yeah, I wanted to jump into a couple of the examples that you gave, and just to kind of give us a broad brush in terms of what this actually looks and feels like. You looked at particularly Idaho and Colorado. You talked about one couple moving to Boise, Idaho from L.A., and just an interesting subtext there. Share that with us.
Yeah, so the Coles were the family that kind of opened the story. They are a newly retired LAPD officer and his wife, who's a nurse. And they knew when Tim, the cop, was ready to retire, they knew they wanted to live in a red state. They were tired of California. They were tired of the decay that they saw around them in Los Angeles. They were tired of basically having to defend the idea that, that their family included a police officer, all the anti-police sentiments. The couple didn't even really feel safe flying their American flag and thin blue line flag outside their home in a suburb outside of Los Angeles because they just thought it was just so contrary to the political view of their neighbors. So they moved to Boise, or to actually a suburb outside of Boise. Boise itself is a little more dense and probably a little bit more like Salt Lake. They're not quite. But, the further out suburbs are, certainly more Republican. They weren't necessarily looking for Republican. These are not, just about everybody I talked to in the story is not a political activist, right?
Right.
They had Jenny Cole, the wife, has, helped with abortions in the past. She's a nurse, and she's not, she went out of her way to stress, and they both stressed they're not necessarily party line hardcore voters, but they wanted certain conservative things in the place where they were going to live. And they got them. They're very happy in Idaho now.
Yeah. You also showed kind of the flip side of that, of what's happening in Colorado.
Yeah. So Colorado has become, and the two states are on parallel tracks. Although Colorado kind of was a little ahead of Idaho in terms of growth. Colorado began growing really fast in like the 2000s, and Idaho really exploded in kind of the 2010s. So Colorado has now largely is not growing quite as fast, but you still have a number of people who are very explicitly moving here because of politics, because they want a blue state. And Colorado is still a lot more affordable than some other blue states like California or, New York City, the parts of New York that draw a lot of liberals. And it's, you definitely are getting more and more people who say that they're moving here because they have to get out of Texas or Florida or what have you. The contrast to in the story was that, a woman who ironically lives relatively near me in Denver, moved here from Texas. She had actually been politically active, but she was scared to fly a pro-abortion rights flag in her yard. She had an abortion as a teenager at cosmetology school and was a strong believer in abortion rights and was kind of horrified to see what was happening in Texas. And she's a Texas native from a small town. She's got generations of family there. It was very hard for her and her partner to leave, but they decided finally they had to. And now she feels great. She's got her abortion rights banner up in, she's got a great, cute little house in a cool neighborhood in Denver. Abortion rights banner up right next to the, her pride flag, and the neighbors have a pride flag up. It's like, it's a classic urban street scene, right? But this is, this is a phenomenon that's continuing to kind of push these states apart, right? Colorado and Idaho, just in the last legislative session, to just diametrically oppose stuff on abortion, on transgender rights, on capital punishment, on just a whole host of issues.
Yeah.
And you see it happening all around the country. Red and blue states are just rapidly going in different directions.
Yeah.
The question is, can the center hold, right?
That's right. And I think one of the interesting things, and you pointed this out really well in your article, talking about this idea that as we kind of continue to clump, you look at some of those kind of downstream effects. You talked about the fact that one party controls the entire legislature in all but 2 of the states. And then this whole idea of, is that okay? And is this part of the laboratories of democracy that the states are supposed to be? What are some of the nuances that you're seeing underneath this, and what are some of the things that we should be watching out for?
Yeah, so one thing when the whole idea that states should be able to chart their own direction is absolutely foundational to the United States of America, right? Like this is an absolute core value of the way this country is constructed. So I mean, we've all got to understand that. That's got to be the baseline of every conversation. But another thing that was very much also foundational in the United States was that they didn't like the idea of strong political parties.
Right.
Obviously, pretty quickly, the founders were disabused of that notion. The country split in two pretty quickly. But nonetheless, the Constitution was not drawn up with the idea that you would have these incredibly strong ideological political parties that we do now. And so what you see is states are basically one state will come up with a law to deal with this hot button issue, and then all the other states of the same hue, be it a red state coming up with something or a blue state, will try and copy it and mimic it, and everybody's kind of rushing to the polls, the right or left polls, to get there. And as states become more and more homogenous, as Americans cluster more, and then and again, not all of this clustering is because of people moving, like the families I talked about. Right. A lot of this clustering comes from other factors, but when the people move, and then that adds to the dynamic, you're pushing these states further and further apart. For 250 years almost, the federalism has functioned as one professor told me, as a safety valve, basically, for the country, where the people who are out of power in Washington, you don't see let's say that you're a Democrat and Donald Trump's president, and you're horrified. But at least here in California, we're going to do the right thing. Right. Let's say you're a Republican and Joe Biden wins the election. You're absolutely horrified. But at least here in Florida, we are going to have the right laws. We're going to do the right thing. Right? It's been this great safety valve. It's enabled us to kind of ride out the winner-take-all phenomenon of our political system. But what happens then to the minority in those states, right? Let's say that you're a Republican in California or a Democrat in Florida. As those states get more and more polarized, there's less and less reason for the parties in power to listen at all to those minorities. They really get shortchanged. And so then, unsurprisingly, what happens? They pick up and go if they can, if they're lucky enough to be able to. Most people can't, but if they're lucky enough to pick up and go, they do. And then that makes the states even more red or blue, right? They've now left. You've got one fewer conservative couple in California and one fewer Democratic couple in Texas.
Yeah.
And those states are just a little bit more. So you can kind of see this dynamic, and the question is whether or not we're going to just basically split down the line, and half the country's going to live in a place where they all say amen to the same systems, and half the country's going to live in a place where they say amen to the same systems. And there's danger in clustering that you don't interact with people of the other party, right? You don't see them as human beings. They're not your neighbors. They're not your friends. They're not picking up your kids from school when you're sick or something like that. You miss out on that interaction. And there's an old joke. Pauline Kael, a film critic from The New Yorker, was the first person who said this. She couldn't believe Nixon won in 1968, I believe it was. She said, because I don't know anyone who voted for Nixon. Well, she didn't. In Manhattan, nobody voted for Nixon, right? That was the punchline.
Exactly.
But now that's really the case. In a lot of the country, you really just don't know people who voted for the other side. Or if you do, I mean, even Manhattan, about 10% of Manhattan voted for Donald Trump, but they probably don't feel comfortable saying it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So you don't, in so much of the country, you don't know. And there's been this whole, Trump has been insisting he won in 2020, right? And part of his refrain is, Joe Biden couldn't have gotten more votes to me. Do you know anyone who voted for Joe Biden? And most of Trump's voters are not going to know people who voted for Joe Biden because we're so clustered, right? And so this is just reinforcing all of that separation that's really toxic to our political system.
Yeah, great insight. Nick Riccardi, Western political writer for the Associated Press. We keep you on all day on this because I think you nailed it right there at the end, that if we no longer know anyone who thinks different, looks different, acts different, lives different, that's not good for the democracy. That's not good for, it's not even good for federalism, let alone what we need to do as the United States of America. This is a fascinating topic, Nick. We look forward to having you back on the program to keep digging into this, what it actually means for all of us. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, we'll step aside for a quick break. When we come back, we're losing a lot of workers from the workforce. Not that many coming in. What does that do to all the entitlement programs? We'll talk about that coming up next on Inside Sources. Stick around.
The race to replace.
Certifying begins.
Had both parties scrambling to get candidates on the ballot.
Republicans will be the only party with a primary.
Listen here for the nominees who made the cut and the beginning of the campaign. The race to replace. Updates mornings and afternoons this week on KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
Hey everybody, it's Julie, coming to you from Logan, Utah's heart of the arts. We've got not one, not two, but 3 historic theaters in one block downtown. They're all bursting with live performances. Trust me, you do not want to miss out. Utah Festival Opera and Musical Theater has 300 professional artists and staff from all over the country performing their hearts out with music by a full live orchestra. You might not realize that having a full live orchestra is a big deal, but it is totally a big deal. They're doing Aida the Opera and Aida the Broadway version, the opera Lohengrin, which has only been performed 5 times in the entire United States, plus Oliver and Our Town, too. They don't call it Utah Festival for nothing. In addition to shows, there's Breakfast with the Stars, late-night cabarets, concerts, workshops, and silent movies with organ accompaniment. Oh my! Wait, just when you think it can't get better, this year only, Utah students in public and private schools get a free ticket to any or all shows they want. What? I know. Don't miss out. UtahFestival.org. UtahFestival.org.
Getting close to retirement? Or have you retired? You've probably got a ton of stress-filled questions on your mind. I'm Jeff Jr. with Trajan Wealth. Getting a second opinion with an individualized investment plan is vital, and our fiduciary advisors do just that. Take it from this Trajan Wealth client.
It was just so pleasant, so comfortable. I think we had 7 different accounts, just stuff scattered all over the place. And then so we just started, here's this, move this. And he even explained it a couple different times. But if I have more questions, he said, just give us a call. And that's what I love. He's a phone call away. I'm glad I know these guys. Such a huge weight off my shoulder.
Imagine not second-guessing investments or monthly retirement income. That's the peace of mind you'll get from working with Trajan Wealth. Call 801-899-7600 today or visit TrajanWealth.com.
Actual client, no compensation, no conflicts. Advisory services offered through Trajan Wealth LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
You trust us for news and information in your car. Now trust us at home. KSL News Radio is your window to the outside world, keeping you informed on the latest breaking news, weather, traffic, sports, and more. Listen on your Amazon Echo or Google Home device. Just say, Alexa, open KSL News Radio, or listen on the KSL News Radio app. Text the word app to 57500. KSL News Radio, Utah's all-day companion for news.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Well, demographics are continuing to shift among America's workforce, and it is going to have a profound effect on our country's future. Baby boomers are one of the largest size generations living in America, and they're retiring in very large numbers. As the number of retirees moves forward, there are fewer workers to actually replace them. And so what does that mean for the economic future of the country? That's what we want to dig into, and we're really pleased to have joining us on the program Alyssa Fowers, a graphic reporter for the Washington Post. And Alyssa, welcome to the show. And as we look at this, the boomers are retiring, and take a look at and give us a sense of why that is bad news, not just for workers, but for the rest of us.
Hi, great to be here. So as you mentioned, baby boomers are retiring, and there's this shrinking ratio of workers to retirees. So if you were born in 2003, that year there were about 5 workers per retiree. When you turn 20 this year, it's about 3.5 workers per retiree. And when you turn 60 in 2063, that's expected to be about 2.6 workers per retiree. So that can cause some difficulties with the systems we have set up right now, one of which is, of course, Social Security. One of the economists I spoke to for this story said every time we talk about older people, we're talking about Social Security, even if we're not talking about Social Security. The program in its current form is expected to be unable to pay full benefits as soon as 2033. There are also some concerns about the ability of people to get the health care that they need, particularly long-term care, as they age and as there's more and more demand and less ability of workers to meet that demand.
Yeah, so as you look at that, let's dig into a couple of those components. The long-term care, I think, is such a big one that no one has really truly factored in as not only are people living longer, but there's more procedures that can be done, more life-saving things that can be done that just weren't done in the past. And many of them are really expensive in terms of either a procedure or a medication or whatever it might be. Kind of dig into that a little bit for us.
So what I focused on in this story is long-term care in terms of people getting assistance in their homes or in institutional settings, such as nursing homes or assisted living facilities. So this is something that is tremendously expensive, and it's not covered by most private insurance or by Medicare. People think that their health insurance will cover this if they wind up needing long-term help, like a home health aide or something like that. But they wind up on their own. Very few people have specifically long-term care insurance. And so what winds up happening, because we don't have a national infrastructure around long-term care, is that people spend out their life savings very quickly trying to get the help they need, and then they wind up on Medicaid because they qualify and have very little money left over, and long-term care is then paid for by Medicaid. So it's a really difficult situation to be in for someone who needs that care, because you basically have to give up your whole life in order to get the health care that you need.
Right. And one of the things that I loved in your piece, we always love the think again moments way beyond the headlines. You talked about it in the context of preparing for that grayer future, that really lawmakers have got to bite the bullet and deal with a whole host of things when it comes to entitlement programs. But I love the fact that you included immigration as part of those policy things that, if Congress can get them right, could actually help solve the problem.
Yes, absolutely. Immigrants already actually account for most of the population growth in this country, and also account for a large part of the workforce in healthcare and healthcare support. So increasing immigration could help to sort of build up the size of the generations behind the baby boomers, and help to sort of push back up that worker to retiree number, and sort of help to contribute to a growing, vibrant America in the future.
Yeah, and then finally, just before I let you go, you also got into this idea of how do we fend off insolvency in these kind of programs. And lawmakers really do have a few choices. They're pretty straightforward and simple, but they seem to be elusive when it comes to Congress.
Yes, Social Security hasn't been updated legislatively in about 40 years. So it used to be updated every few years as the world changed, but it was updated in 1983 and really hasn't been touched since then. It's sort of a poison pill. So, as I mentioned, the Social Security will not be able to pay out full benefits by, the latest estimate is 2033. So, there's really only a couple of things that can be done. One is to cut benefits. A popular way of doing that would be raising the retirement age. And the other way is to increase fundraising through taxes. The interesting thing about that 1983 update is that they actually got a lot of things right when trying to plan for the solvency of the program. The one thing that they didn't predict was how much money would be sort of outside of the taxable cap. I realize that's not a very easy way to say this, but it used to be that about 90% of the income that Americans made was taxed for Social Security purposes. Right. But now so much of the income that is made goes to people who have very, very high incomes that it's actually not taxed at all. So only about 80% of income in America is taxed towards Social Security. So there are, there's really not a lot to be done outside of cut the benefits or raise the taxes, but they're both really difficult propositions for politicians.
That's right. Yeah, sadly, the politicians don't like to touch either of those very often, if at all, and then getting them to come to a consensus around it has been increasingly difficult as well. I think this is such an important conversation, and I love the way that you've attacked it in terms of we got to think about this different if we're actually going to get this done and continue to have this solvent moving into the years ahead. Alyssa Fowers, a graphics reporter for the Washington Post. Great piece in the Post. Alyssa, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's some great perspective there. I don't think anybody out there has been saying immigration is part of the solution when it comes to those entitlement programs. And again, it is the reforming of the immigration system to make it easier for people to come here legally and then be workers legally to pay taxes and to be part of community and all of those things, it is part of the solution. We have to have that conversation, and we have to have an honest conversation about either reducing the benefits, raising the taxes, increasing the retirement age. All of those things have to be a serious conversation if we're going to get a serious result that will be good for the country. All right, that wraps up hour number 1 of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for some top-of-the-hour news. Much more to come in hour number 2. Stick around. We'll be right back.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM. KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. A popular economist says Airbnb is headed toward a crash. It could possibly lead to a big crash in the housing market. The senior research fellow at the University of Utah's Gardner Policy Institute, Dan Eskich, disagrees.
If all of those Airbnbs came online today and hit the market in Salt Lake County, it's like a month or two worth of inventory. So it wouldn't make a dramatic impact.
Now, Eskich says this could be a little different in Summit County, where 50% of the houses are now short-term rentals. The Great Salt Lake's levels have likely peaked for the year, with spring runoff drawing to a close. The brand-new Great Salt Lake Commissioner, Brian Steed, says the lake rose about 5.5 feet since last fall, almost triple what it normally gets in a winter.
We're feeling pretty good about where things are right now. We're not there where we need to be, but we're so much better than we thought we might.
Steed says the lake still needs another 5 feet or so to reach what's considered a healthy level. He says when it comes to this past winter, we don't think we're out of the woods. We still need to conserve water. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. President Biden bragging about the U.S. economy when he was speaking today in West Columbia, South Carolina. Here's the president.
All those members of Congress who voted against it suddenly realize how great it is, and they're bragging about it.
And what the president's talking about is the Inflation Reduction Act. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average, near the close of trading, down 365 points right now. The NASDAQ has dropped 112. And our KSL weather looks like it's going to clear up as the week goes on and going to get hotter, too. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:02.
This summer, the political season heats up.
By August, it'll be time for debates. Can you believe it?
We're planning coverage of the real issues, the important stories that impact how we live.
Listen each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Amanda, getting dinner time taken care of any time during the year is tough, but especially in the summer when everybody's schedules are totally blown up and everybody's running in different directions. That is, unless you enlist the help of Beehive Meals.
I've been using Beehive Meals now for months, and I just love it, Tim. I get 10 freezer meals delivered, and I just take one out in the morning, put it in the crock pot, and then it's warm whenever anybody's ready for dinner that night, and they're so nutritious.
It's going to save you time. It's going to save you money. The average cost of a serving is less than $3.50, and obviously your family's going to love all of the great recipes that Beehive Meals offers.
And they have macro-balanced menus, so if you want higher protein and moderate carbs, they have that. They even have gluten-free options.
They do. So you just take this freezer meal, and then you put it in the crock pot, and within hours, your family eats. Whenever they come by, it's going to be warm for them. There's a reason why they're Best of State winners 2 years in a row.
Try Beehive Meals. Go to beehivemeals.com.
School is out and the weather's warm. Summer's here. Hi, I'm Jay Broadbent at Alpine Home Medical. We offer you the best quality products as well as excellent customer service. Whether you're in one of our 10 retail stores or shopping online, we'll provide you with the best experience possible. From CPAPs to compression stockings to portable oxygen concentrators to wheelchairs and scooters, you won't find a better selection anywhere. Our staff is here to find exactly what you need. And that's the reason why Alpine Home Medical has been voted Best of State in medical supply every year since 2009. When you're in need of medical supplies, we promise you'll find what you want at Alpine Home Medical. If not, we'll find it for you. Don't have time to come in? Shop online at alpinehomemedical.com. That's alpinehomemedical.com.
Alpine Home Medical, we bring wellness home.
Join Mike Stevens of Capital Wealth Advisors for Retire Right Radio, Saturdays at 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. That's Retire Right Radio with Mike Stevens, Saturdays at 5 a.m. and 9 p.m.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
Big delays continue due to a crash eastbound I-80 at 2300 East, blocking a left lane with the backups reaching 7th East. But further south, if you're going to be traveling between Utah and Juab counties, heavy delays on I-15. On the northbound side, they go from Mona up to Santaquin, and the southbound side, they go from Mona to Nephi. Advanced Window Products, high-efficiency windows, $2,000 off 10 windows or more for a limited time. 801-850-9100 or advancedwindowsusa.com. From the KSL Traffic Center, I'm Ricky Meese.
KSL weather, partly cloudy today with a high of 93 degrees, and we could see pop-up thunderstorms over northeastern Utah over the next 3 days. Temperatures rise toward 100 on Monday and Tuesday. And right now, 84 degrees, partly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Russia continues to make a host of headlines. Everything from failed mutiny by the mercenary leader Prigozhin. We've got ramifications of his rebellion and uprising to Putin's regime. We've got things impacting the Russian people. We have American journalists inside of Russia. We have the war in Ukraine. Beyond the headline, what's underneath that? What should we be watching? And what comes next? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Let's start with a really interesting component to Russia today. A CNN reporter asked Prime Minister Lukashenko of Belarus about the Wagner Group leader Prigozhin's whereabouts. Of course, it was noted that Prigozhin had gone to Belarus and that was going to be his place. And so when asked by the CNN reporter, here was the response.
Regarding Yevgeny Prigozhin, he's in St. Petersburg. Where is he this morning? He might have left for Moscow or for somewhere else, but he's not on Belarusian territory.
So he's not in Belarus. He's either in St. Petersburg or on his way to Moscow. And if you were Prigozhin, isn't that where you would go? I think that's just a very stunning statement coming from the leader of Belarus that had really brokered the deal. That was the reports, of course, coming out that it was the leader there of Belarus negotiating to get Prigozhin and the Wagner Group to stop their march towards Moscow. And that's all we kind of heard for the last week or so. And now suddenly he is not on Belarusian territory. He's either in St. Petersburg or on his way to Moscow. That's curious to me. We'll have to dig into that a little bit as the day goes on and continue to follow those developments. Also interesting, former ambassador to Russia, John Sullivan, gave an exclusive interview with the Washington Post today, giving his thoughts about the aftermath of the Wagner Group coup attempt. Here's what he said about the effects that this is going to have on Vladimir Putin's regime.
It affects the most important thing he has going on right now, which is his war in Ukraine, and whether he'll be able to continue to pursue that special military operation without what was the most successful element of the Russian forces there, which was Wagner, whether Russia will be able to continue to resist the Ukrainian counteroffensive. He's used Wagner around the world, particularly in Africa. What does this do to his influence and Russia's influence in other countries, all called into question by this extraordinary mutiny over 36 hours in Ukraine and Russia?
I think those are some of the more subtle things that are important to watch. What is going on around the world in places like Africa, in Syria, other places where the Wagner Group has really played a major role in what's going on there. Continuing on, he discussed the future of Prigozhin, and former Ambassador Sullivan had this to say about that situation.
Well, I have to believe that it is intolerable for Vladimir Putin to have Prigozhin at liberty and apparently traveling within Russia and who knows where else, after Putin himself labeled him a traitor and said that he had stabbed him, Putin, and Russia in the back. So to the extent that Prigozhin survives this, and I'm skeptical that he will, I think Vladimir Putin ultimately has to bring Prigozhin to heel. He may take his time in doing it because that's his style, and he may also be limited in what he can do to Prigozhin right now. But I don't see how the two of them continue to exist within Russia. Putin can't allow that.
It's also interesting the former ambassador gave some really interesting insight into the Biden administration's situation and the need to avoid any hint that the U.S. is seeking regime change when it comes to Russia.
The Biden administration is very careful to not give any suggestion that it is seeking regime change in Russia. Why is the United States concerned about this? We need to be careful about what we hope and plan for. If we're seeking regime change in Russia, the replacement regime may be even worse. I'm not sure that Prigozhin and his cronies at Wagner are an improvement on what is a brutal regime that Putin presides over in Moscow right now.
So that's an important piece of this. Some people have quickly rallied to Prigozhin as some sort of hero, and he is not that. I don't think he would be any better, and in many ways, I think he would be much worse than Vladimir Putin. Remember, the Wagner Group is known for just incredible brutality. Many of the war crimes charges coming out of Ukraine are directed directly at the Wagner Group and the way that they have assassinated individuals, that they have taken out citizens, just brutality upon brutality. And so in some of these, we do have to be careful what we wish for, because the alternative might be worse than the devil we currently know in Vladimir Putin. And so that's an interesting thing to watch and to monitor, especially for the administration, to be able to sort that through and figure out what that actually means. Now, finally, as we wrap up with the former ambassador, he addressed the possibility of a nuclear threat coming from Russia and why he thinks it will be very unlikely that Putin decides to use a tactical nuclear weapon against Ukraine or anywhere else.
I think it is unlikely in the extreme that Putin would use a nuclear weapon in Ukraine, let alone against a NATO ally of the United States. Why do I say that? I think it would be irrational. I don't think it would improve Putin's position either, or thinking about what it would do is to his support from countries that he's relied on, principally China. We've seen reporting in the media recently about warnings that Putin has received from President Xi about not using a nuclear weapon.
So that's on the good news front. Underneath the headlines is that it does seem less likely that even a cornered Vladimir Putin is not likely to use a tactical nuclear weapon against Ukraine or in other places, including especially NATO allies. China also seems to be sending some messages to Russia that they shouldn't be thinking about using tactical nuclear weapons in this war against Russia, against Ukraine. And so those will be interesting things to watch and monitor. And again, I think that's kind of in the good news category, that it doesn't seem likely that you have to remember Vladimir Putin is out to preserve Vladimir Putin and to make sure that he remains in power for the rest of his days. That's how he wants to go out. And I think that his highest priority is to make sure that things stay settled enough, that the status quo is preserved enough that he can stay in power. Now, shifting on to one other component, looking at Russia. Yesterday, while conducting an operation against ISIS in Syria, 3 U.S. drones were harassed by Russian jet fighters. And during a press conference earlier today, the Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder gave this statement regarding that incident.
3 MQ-9 drones were conducting a mission against ISIS targets. 3 Russian fighter jets began harassing those drones using things like parachute flares to drop in front of them, as well as one aircraft engaging its afterburner. Clearly meant to harass. and clearly unprofessional and unsafe behavior on the part of the Russians. You've heard us say before that our focus in Syria is purely on the defeat ISIS mission, and so that will continue to be our focus. We call on the Russian forces to cease this type of reckless behavior and to behave like professional airmen.
Very important message coming there out of the Pentagon. Press Secretary Pat Ryder saying, look, the only thing worse than a war by choice is a war by mistake or accident. And this kind of behavior from these 3 Russian fighter jets, unsafe behavior, flying in front, dropping these parachute things in front of the drones, all of that to harass and annoy. And again, if one of those things goes sideways, one of those Russian fighter pilots makes a mistake, then suddenly we're dealing with a completely different set of incidents and things that would ratchet up in scale that would not be good for anybody, the United States, Russia, Syria, or anyone else for that matter. So those are all things that are going on beyond the headlines as it relates to Russia. And so we'll continue to monitor all of those things. And again, it's so interesting to me that you've got the leader of the Wagner Group is now back inside of Russia, somewhere between St. Petersburg and Moscow. And it'd be interesting to know if he's just traveling on his own, if he's got an armed escort, if he's got people tracking and follow. It'll be very interesting to see how that all plays out. And we'll continue to track all of that here on Inside Sources.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. July is sure to bring the heat, summer travel, and the drama of a rare Utah special election.
Get out the vote.
Rely on KSL News Radio to keep track of the stories.
KSL News Radio's Lindsay Aerts reports
while you're keeping track of family. Listen mornings and afternoons to KSL News Radio, your all-summer companion for news.
Do you know how to tell if a clogged drain is something to worry about or not? What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and I understand it's annoying and inconvenient, but sometimes a clogged drain can be a sign there's a more serious issue with your sewer main line. If the drains in the lowest level of your home aren't draining, or you flush a toilet and it comes up somewhere else like a shower or a floor drain, I'm urging you to look at this as more than just an annoyance. The last thing I want you to experience is a sewer backup. If you're a homeowner experiencing any of these issues, the first step would be to snake the line to see if it's just a blockage, which one of our drain techs can do for only $29. Yep, you heard that right. Any Hour Services will snake any drain line with normal access for only $29. Sinks, showers, tubs, toilets, floor drains, laundry drains, even that sewer main line that connects to the city. We'll snake any line for just $29. For help with your drain issues, call Any Hour Services at 801-443-7700. You can Google Any Hour Services. You can even schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
At Shane Company, we believe everybody is made to shine. It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. Shining is not for a chosen few. Like a rare gemstone, each one of us was created under just the right set of circumstances. Your moments, your milestones, your love story, all deserve to shine bright. You don't need an occasion or an invitation. You and your life are the event. At Shane Company, we handcraft our jewelry with the greatest care and hand select the most beautiful gemstones so you can shine. So put on a pair of earrings that make your eyes sparkle. Wear diamonds that light up the room. Try on sapphires in every color of the rainbow. Give an heirloom that collects new stories with each generation. We're all made to shine. Shane Company, fine jewelry since 1929.
Happy kids heal faster. That's why Starlight Children's Foundation is dedicated to improving the mental well-being of sick kids. Being in a hospital facing painful treatments takes away from the happiness of childhood. But that's where Starlight comes in. We provide entertainment, comfort, and distraction through Starlight gaming, hospital gowns, and toy deliveries to bring smiles to over 800 hospitals. Starlight programs are what happiness is made of. Learn more at starlight.org.
You could throw your flip-flop at a bug.
Ew, a bug, get it.
But the chances of actually hitting it
Over there.
are statistically
It's still alive.
unlikely. Good thing nature's got your back. Stem bug killers combine powerful active ingredients found in plants, like lemongrass and geraniol, and scientifically engineer them into effective bug-fighting formulas, safe for use as directed around people, pets, and throughout the home. Stem. Rooted in nature, optimized by science.
Hey, this is Chris from JCW's. If anything rivals our burgers, it's our bacon. It makes the perfect combination with our guacamole, jalapeno, or our hickory barbecue burgers. JCW's, quality and a lot of it.
Tim and Amanda.
If this is the first time you've ever joined us, can we just say welcome, welcome? I hope you come back and see us again. Tim and I have been doing this for a long time, and we love what we do. But the best part of what we do always and will always be connecting with you.
How many times do we say people don't understand how much information and really love we get from that side of the radio?
Yes.
They thank us for giving it to them, but we get it back so many times.
Wake up with Utah's Morning News with Tim and Amanda, 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, a Utah economist says short-term rental landlords in Utah shouldn't expect a crash in the values of their properties. Second, the Great Salt Lake has risen about as far as it's going to this year. That's about 5 feet. Third, President Biden was in South Carolina today, bragging about thousands of new jobs that he says his administration has created. Right now, 84 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
How affordable is middle-class life in America? It's an important question, but one that can end up with all kinds of different answers. It matters what you measure, as always, and how you measure it. One study called the Cost of Thriving Index released a report detailing how the cost of being middle class has skyrocketed over the decades. But we want to get past the headline. Is that really the case? What's underneath the numbers? What are we really measuring? What are we leaving out? How is it skewing the answer? And what does it mean to the direction of the country? Scott Winship, Senior Fellow and the Director of the Center on Opportunity and Social Mobility at the American Enterprise Institute, joins us. And Scott, you've taken a look at this cost of thriving. And underneath the numbers, again, depending on what you measure, there might be a little different story. Tell us about it.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Boyd. So I wrote a paper last week with Jeremy Horpadal, my co-author, who's at Central Arkansas University. We took a look at this paper that was put out by American Compass, which had a couple big headline-grabbing claims. One was that the number of weeks that it takes the typical male worker to afford 5 key goods and services, which I'll get to in a second, but that it essentially took 40 weeks for the typical male worker to afford those things in 1985. That increased by 22 weeks between 85 and 2022. And by the way, in 2022, it took 62 weeks to afford those. Now, your listeners may note that there are only 52 weeks in a year. So if it takes 62 weeks, that's a big problem. But we went back and sort of looked at what he did, and we found a couple of pretty big errors that we can talk about. We accounted for taxes because you pay your costs out of after-tax income. We expanded the group to not just be male full-time workers, but to include women and younger full-time workers. When we did all that stuff, we found that the cost of living, the cost of thriving actually had declined a little bit over time. And then we sort of take one more step and say, like, really, this isn't the right way. This whole cost of thriving approach of looking at 5 things and comparing it to income, that's not the right way to do it. We actually argue that that earnings, after accounting for the increase in the cost of living, that earnings are up by 53% between 1985 and 2022.
And so as you look at those numbers, let's start with just kind of the baseline there in terms of what is it that they were measuring? What are those things that would constitute thriving that we're working so hard to get?
Yep. So the American Compass report looks at 5 things. It looks at food, which is sort of the cost of a nutritionally adequate diet. He looks at housing, where he uses the typical rent in Raleigh, North Carolina. He looks at healthcare, which is the cost of an employer health coverage, essentially. He looks at transportation, which is a set of popular cars that AAA has looked at the cost of. And finally, he looks at higher education, which he finds is the price of a in-school tuition at a four-year public university.
All right. And so as you look at those, and again, you can look at the numbers in all those different ways, and as you said, in terms of taxes and all the other things that are going on there, and looking at the right subset of people who you're actually measuring against. Give us kind of that next level in terms of your conclusion, in terms of what should we be, when we talk about thriving, I think that's an important thing to be looking at and having conversations about, but what else should we actually be putting in there?
Yeah, so other than the things that I've mentioned about taxes and kind of expanding the scope to other workers besides men, you can kind of think of it in terms of three different problems. I think, there were a set of errors that were in the earlier report. For instance, when they look at the cost of employer-provided health care, they actually include the part that employers pay from the premium for a health insurance plan as being a cost that workers have to pay. And that's not right. Or if it is, or if you do think it comes out of workers' paychecks ultimately, then you also need to count it as income on the worker side before you take it away as a cost. They didn't do that. The other big mistake was for the cost of higher education, they use just the sticker price, that the colleges advertise, but hardly anybody pays that sticker price. There's a lot of redistribution that happens through institutional aid that schools provide. There's federal grants as well. So the typical person that goes to one of these colleges is not paying the sticker price. They're paying something well below that, and so we use that price instead. So those are just errors. That I think a second factor that's a problem with this approach is that it doesn't account for the fact that the goods and services he's looking at in 1985 aren't as good as the goods and services that he's looking at in 2022. Houses, for instance, apartments are much bigger and nicer than they were in 1985. And so we try to adjust the 1985 numbers to account for, to sort of keep quality of these goods and services constant over time. And then the third real problem is all the stuff that he leaves out. So you're looking at 5 important goods and services that all got more expensive over time, but it leaves out things like clothing, household furnishings, entertainment, communication. These are things that have gotten cheaper compared to paychecks over time. And so to exclude those, you're sort of cherry picking a little bit what kind of costs you're looking at.
Yeah, what you measure, how you measure it makes such a big difference, and it's so easy to skew the numbers one way or another to get to an outcome. I know one of the things that you have spent a lot of your brain power on over the years is that whole idea of thriving and upward mobility. And so what are the things that we should be looking at when we say we really want people, citizens of this country, to thrive? What are some of the other things beyond just what's easily countable, the things that maybe you can't count that are also part of thriving?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's some things that are countable, such as intergenerational mobility, upward mobility out of poverty. I think the problem with a report like this one that we looked at is that it sort of gives the middle class the impression that everybody is doing terribly, and then that distracts from what our real problems are. So one of those real problems is just not having enough upward mobility out of poverty, and that actually hasn't gotten better over time. And then there's a bunch of stuff that is harder to put numbers to that really involve kind of the breakdown of our social lives, of social capital in the United States, which is also kind of a form of declining opportunity, right? If you want to live in a two-parent family that's intact, if you want to sort of live among community that's supportive of you, where you're doing things with your neighbors, where you're actively involved in civic life, when you're connected to a church, when you're connected to other institutions, where you can trust those institutions and have confidence in them, those have all gotten worse over time, absolutely. And we have we've got some numbers for some of them we don't, but that's really a place where if you're concerned about declining opportunity, and and problems getting worse. It's really kind of in this social sphere rather than living standards, which have actually improved over time.
Yeah, so important. It does go back to the old axiom: everything that counts can't be counted, and everything that can be counted doesn't necessarily count.
That's right.
And how you count them also matters, and that's a critical part of that. Scott Winship, Senior Fellow and Director of the Center on Opportunity and Social Mobility at the American Enterprise Institute. Scott, always appreciate your thinking and your perspective, especially as it relates to that whole idea of opportunity, social mobility, and what it means to us, and some of these things that maybe don't get counted as well. Some we're getting better at counting and assessing in terms of that connective tissue in our society, and we always appreciate your work and carving out some time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I always enjoy it.
We're going to step aside for some bottom of the hour news. When we come back, we're going to talk about the 2017 tax cuts, what they mean, the impact they've had, how have they impacted rising deficit spending, what's true, what's not. We'll break it down coming up next. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top local story this hour. Salt Lake City's school district just named a new superintendent, Elizabeth Grant. KSL News Radio's Britt Johnson has more.
Grant spoke today about the challenges and goals for the district, saying there's a chance for school closures in the future because of dwindling population. But Grant is optimistic, saying she plans on creating a work environment that teachers will want to be a part of.
The superintendent's main goal, starting out, she says, is to get out and see firsthand what the community needs and how to best serve. Orem firefighters were called out to 10 fires started by fireworks on the 4th of July. A news release says the fires were in homes and yards as well as in dumpsters. They say the fires were completely preventable. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, says the U.S. is considering providing cluster munitions to Ukraine. Human rights groups say the big danger of cluster bombs comes from the ones that don't explode and pose a danger to civilians later. Here's Pentagon spokesperson Brigadier General Patrick Ryder.
In the event that we do provide this capability, we would be carefully selecting rounds with low dud rates for which we have recent testing data.
The U.S. says Russia is using cluster bombs in Ukraine, and Milley says some European allies have also been providing them. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average closing the day down 366 points today. NASDAQ down 112, the S&P 500 down 35. And our KSL weather, things are clearing up, but we're not completely done with the chance of thunderstorms. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:31.
Early mornings can be hard enough, just getting yourself going.
We try to make it a little easier with news and weather from comfortable, trusted anchors and reporters.
Join us on Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9
on KSL News Radio. I have to admit, when I heard that Hale Center Theater was going to be presenting Newsies, I was really excited. My whole family, as a matter of fact. Dee and I caught the performance the other night, and it is terrific. The youthful energy is simply amazing. Song after song that you love, highlighting, of course, a wonderful story that we can all appreciate. The youthful audience, too, they were loving Hale Center Theater and the presentation of Newsies. But much more is coming up, too. Disney's Finding Nemo Jr., Catch Me If You Can, a murder mystery, Around the World in 80 Days, and Elf the Musical is going to take us through the holidays. All of that and so much more is waiting for you at Hale Center Theater. Don't be left out on Newsies. It is so much fun. Your whole family is absolutely going to love it. And all you have to do is go to hct.org and get your tickets now. That's hct.org, Hale Center Theater.
And we're live here outside the Perez family home, just waiting for the... And there they go, almost on time this morning. Mom is coming out the front door strong with a double-arm kid carry. Looks like Dad has the bags. Daughter is bringing up the rear. Oh, but the diaper bag wasn't closed. Diapers and toys are everywhere. Ooh, but Mom has just nailed the perfect car seat buckle for the toddler. And now the eldest daughter, who looks to be about 9 or 10, has secured herself in the booster seat. Dad zips the bag closed, and they're off. But looks like Mom doesn't realize her coffee cup is still on the roof of the car. And there it goes. Oh, that's a shame. That mug was a fam favorite.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Just nail the big stuff, like making sure your kids are buckled correctly in the right seat for their age and size. Learn more at nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
Visit nhtsa.gov/
the right seat. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Would you be upset if you lost $111,000 in retirement income? Get this, 96% of Americans, 96%, lose an average of $111,000 in Social Security income. Learn how you could avoid this in a free report, the Social Security Decisions Guide from Boss Retirement Solutions, a 5-time winner of Utah's Best of State Award. If you've saved at least $200,000 and have not filed for Social Security, get this free report by calling 801-682-4448. This free report is loaded with critical information that can help you avoid losing $111,000 in Social Security income. So call 801-682-4448. That's 801-682-4448. Advisory services offered through Boss Retirement Advisors, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Insurance products and services offered through Boss Retirement Solutions.
And we're looking at an emergency traffic situation once again, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
If you're going to be traveling I-15 between Utah and Juab counties, we don't have a lot of traffic cameras down there, but I do know there are some major issues. We've had a vehicle fire and a crash, both of those on northbound I-15 north of Mona and prior to Santaquin, so traffic is just really jammed up in that direction. Then on the southbound side, you're dealing with road work delays between Mona and Nephi. When it comes to trusted, affordable auto care, nobody does it better than Burt Brothers Tire and Service. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, partly cloudy today with a high of 93. We could see pop-up thunderstorms over northeastern Utah over the next 3 days. Temperatures will be rising toward 100 on Monday and Tuesday. And right now, we're at 84 degrees under partly cloudy skies at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, we have just 2 more years with the 2017 tax cuts before they are set to expire, barring any changes from Congress. Many have blamed the tax cuts for the rising deficit spending that we've had going on in the country. The question is, beyond the headline, is that true? And will raising taxes actually solve our financial problems? So we're going to get down to the bottom of that. Adam Michel is the Director of Tax Policy Studies at the Cato Institute and joins us to dig into this just a little bit in terms of those tax cuts. Did they cause rising deficits? Are they the problem, the solution? Where do we go from here? Adam, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on. It's great to be back.
So let's dig into this. Of course, a lot of people just point to the 2017 tax cut, say this is the reason we've got deficit spending. Your analysis that tells us something a little different beyond the headline.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The 2017 tax cuts, some people even go further back to the early 2000s Bush tax cuts also being the problem here. It's because of these tax cuts that we have an unsustainable budget. But the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office here in D.C., recently put out their long-term budget outlook, and their estimates unequivocally show that the rising deficits in the future cannot be fixed with just higher taxes. If you sort of take a illustrative example and say and sort of pretend for the sake of the exercise that we were to bring in as much revenue as we did in the year 2000 when the government was actually running budget surpluses, one of the higher rates of revenue that the federal government has brought in our history. and you assume that that stays constant for the next 30 years, we still have a deficit deficits that rise to 9% of GDP at the end of that timeline. So there's just the problem here is unsustainable increases in spending, and certainly can't be fixed with changes to the tax code.
Yeah, and break that down for us a little bit in terms of where we are in terms of what the government is bringing in, what it's actually collecting in taxes. And then again, I think that debate of do we have a taxing problem or do we have a spending problem? It seems to me that if we don't get the spending right, we'll never be able to tax our way out of it.
So the federal government historically over the last 50 years has averaged about 17.5% of GDP in revenue. That's how much they raise on average about 17.5% of GDP in tax revenue. This past year in 2022, we actually had historically high, some of the highest revenues we've had in the last 2 decades, at almost 20% of GDP. And this coming year, we're projected to still be about a percentage point above that historical average, bringing in about 18.5% of GDP in revenue. But the problem is, while revenues are historically high, spending is significantly higher. The historical average of spending is systematically higher than revenue. And if you look at the sort of projections going out into the future, spending is projected to just continue to ratchet up over time, while revenues are expected to remain high but relatively flat. And it's the discrepancy between those two, between revenues and spending, that's why we have a federal deficit. And I think the growth rate in spending over time is certainly a problem that can only be fixed by spending reforms. But we can still debate whether or not the overall level of government is correct. I'm a fan of limited government. I think we should have a smaller government, which require less tax revenue and a whole lot less spending. But the level is debatable. This growth rate of federal deficits into the future is certainly not debatable. That is 100% a spending problem.
Yeah, and I want to get into a couple of components of that. And one of the things that you pointed out that I think is so important is looking at the growth rate of health and retirement spending, and that's not something that you can just crank up the tax rate a little bit to fix.
No, that's exactly right. And the Congressional Budget Office has been sounding this alarm for multiple decades now. If you go back and read their sort of annual reports, they continually say that health and retirement spending is growing faster than the economy. And by definition, this cannot go on forever. You can't have, if something is growing faster than the economy, eventually it will consume all the productive resources that the United States has, and that's certainly untenable. And so something eventually has to give. We can't keep spending more and more on retirement benefits and health benefits for the indefinite future. And that's again, this is not a problem that can be fixed by raising more revenue. Ultimately, we have to fix the benefit formulas that and what that drive this increase, the increases in spending over time.
Yeah, one of the things that I loved in your piece, Adam, is that one, just raising taxes doesn't guarantee that we're going to lower the deficits or we're going to reduce the debt. Those things are just not inseparably connected. That's something we have to figure out and that Congress has to deal with. But the thing that I really love that you got to, it's kind of that think again moment beyond the headlines that we love on this show, and that is this kind of counterintuitive thing that by keeping taxes low, it's also a way to constrain that level of growth. Explain that for us.
Yeah. So I think there's two pieces there. One, often you'll hear people say that we shouldn't that we should lower taxes and that will constrain the growth of government. I don't think that's necessarily the way it works. I don't think we can quote unquote starve the beast is what the theory is.
Right.
So I think the opposite is true. That when you raise taxes, I think it fuels the beast. Historically, tax increases are associated with more than a $1 of increased spending. I think it's about if you raise taxes by $1, Congress ends up actually spending an extra $1.50 per each dollar of tax revenue raised. And so historically, tax increases do not go to pay down the deficit. Instead, they fuel additional government spending, leading us with often a worse deficit than we had before. And that doesn't even account for the sort of slower economic growth and economic costs with raising taxes. And so I think it's often a false choice of do you raise taxes or do you cut spending. Historically, raising taxes is not a way to fix the problems of deficit and debt. Instead, you have to start on the spending side, and there needs to be a political consensus that those reforms are needed. And that's sort of what his history bears out, and where my piece is I encourage Congress to start on the spending side, that the tax conversation is really a distraction from what's actually driving our budget problems.
That is so powerful and so important, because often we do get distracted with the politics of raising or lowering taxes. It becomes either that shiny object or it becomes just another fake fight and false choice, as you described it. And that often keeps us a safe distance from having the real conversation, the important conversation, which is on the spending side. And both sides have to come to the table for that. Adam Michel, Director of Tax Policy Studies at the Cato Institute. Great insight. This is a great piece you need to check out. It'll help you frame things properly, especially as we head into a big election cycle. And we're also going to have some spending conversations come September in Congress when they have to fund the government. These are important things for us to keep in mind and keep in place so that we can keep our focus in the right space. Adam, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, again, that's Adam Michel, Director of Tax Policy at the Cato Institute. Brilliant stuff. And don't think by raising taxes that we're going to cut spending and deficits. Usually it is an increase. We increase taxes, we increase spending. That's not the solution. We've got to start on the spending side. We've got to get that under control. We'll step aside for one last break. Final thoughts on Inside Sources coming up next.
With the economy the way it is, you're probably staying put. So invest in your home, your number one asset, with beautiful custom replacement windows from Advanced Window Products. They're a local Utah company building beautiful vinyl framed and insulated double pane windows for 37 years right here in Salt Lake City. Advanced Window Products will save you money on your energy bill. Get security features to keep your family safe. And at Advanced Window Products, it's all custom. And the best part? They're local. They build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. So there's no middleman markup. You save on the highest quality windows in Utah. Plus, Rocky Mountain and Dominion offer rebates. For a limited time, they offer 60-month 0% financing. And right now, get $2,000 off 10 windows or more. They're working 8 weeks out. So make the call now. Advanced Window Products, 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, or visit AdvancedWindowsUSA.com.
I guess it's human nature, Amanda, that no matter how much money we have in our savings account, it never seems like it's enough. And if you find yourself in that mode right now, let us direct you over to our friends at UCCU. They are wanting to help you supercharge your savings.
UCCU is offering high-rate savings options with yields up to 5.5%. All you do is go to UCCU.com and select a high-rate savings option to do just what you said, supercharge your savings.
You're going to get a much bigger return on your savings right now. It's a savings certificate, which means you make one deposit up front and your money grows over a fixed period of time. So you can have that grow over 5 years, but UCCU has created some very short-term savings certificates with high yields, short like 6 months, 9 months, or a year.
So you decide how long do you want to put that money. You deposit money, a one-time only deposit, and then you let it stay in it. The longer it stays in there, the higher the interest rate you earn.
And if you need immediate access to your money, UCCU's Money Market will give you a high yield and anytime access.
UCCU, you're going to love where you bank.
Hey everybody, it's Julie, coming to you from Logan, Utah's heart of the arts. We've got not one, not two, but 3 historic theaters in one block downtown. They're all bursting with live performances. Trust me, you do not want to miss out. Utah Festival Opera and Musical Theater has 300 professional artists and staff from all over the country performing their hearts out with music by a full live orchestra. You might not realize that having a full live orchestra is a big deal, but it is totally a big deal. They're doing Aida the Opera and Aida the Broadway version, the opera Lohengrin, which has only been performed 5 times in the entire United States. Plus Oliver and Our Town, too. They don't call it Utah Festival for nothing. In addition to shows, there's Breakfast with the Stars, late-night cabarets, concerts, workshops, and silent movies with organ accompaniment. Oh my! Wait, just when you think it can't get better, this year only, Utah students in public and private schools get a free ticket to any or all shows they want. What? I know. Don't miss out. UtahFestival.org. UtahFestival.org.
Imagine it's the last ride, but your symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome with constipation, or IBS-C, are taking you for a ride. What should you do? Keep managing your constipation with belly pain the same old way? Or try getting ahead of your symptoms by talking to your doctor about treating it with Linzess, linaclotide. Linzess is a prescription medicine that treats IBS-C in adults. It's not a laxative. It's a once-daily pill that helps you get ahead of your symptoms. It's proven to help you have more frequent and complete bowel movements and helps relieve overall abdominal symptoms, belly pain, discomfort, and bloating. These symptoms were studied in combination, not individually.
Do not give Linzess to children less than 2. It may harm them. Do not take Linzess if you have a bowel blockage. Get immediate help if you develop unusual or severe stomach pain, especially with bloody or black stools. The most common side effect is diarrhea, sometimes severe. If it's severe, stop taking Linzess and call your doctor right away. Other side effects include gas, stomach area pain, and swelling.
Imagine, what could relief from IBS-C mean for you? Talk to your doctor and say yes to Linzess. Learn more at linzess.com or call 1-800-LINZESS.
At Your Service Pros Heating and Air recently received the following review on Yelp. I'm so glad I got a second opinion from At Your Service Pros. They identified the same items of work to be done, but gave me a much more realistic quote. I'll definitely use them again. Thanks, Seth. We're glad we were able to do the repairs for less than half of what the other company quoted him. There's a reason we're one of the highest rated companies on both Google and Yelp. If you want a free second opinion on your HVAC repairs, give us a call at 801-YOUR-PRO. That's 801-YOUR-PRO.
If you're hiring, it can feel like trying to find a needle in a haystack. You can hope the right person comes along, or you can just use ZipRecruiter. Like Marco, president of operations at Telly Tires and Auto Centers.
ZipRecruiter helps me find all the right people, even the most difficult jobs to fill.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Now try ZipRecruiter free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. ZipRecruiter.com/FREE.
Get Mr. Max Performance Missionary Package. 1 performance suit, 4 and collar stretch shirts, 3 ties, 1 mission belt, and 1 pair of Echo or Johnston & Murphy shoes. Just $595.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, the Salt Lake City School District has a new superintendent, replacing a couple of others who didn't stay very long. Second, rising rents on the Wasatch Front are linked to an increase in homelessness. Third, the United States looking at providing cluster bombs to Ukraine, even though human rights groups say they can be deadly to civilians after the fighting ends. Right now, 84 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson, and we're going to bring it full circle. We started the program today talking about some of the safeguards that were being put in place by the Pentagon following a number of high-profile leaks of information, including some things that were shared on a gaming site. A very young officer, Airman First Class, who was just showing off. Was really just trying to have a little vibrato, a little street cred with those on that gaming platform. And when we talked about that with Ryan Vogel from Utah Valley University, we talked about the fact that the Pentagon can go all through these different kinds of behavioral controls in terms of who can enter a secured area where these kind of documents might be. They often call that the SCIF, the Sensitive Compartmented Information Facilities, SCIF. And so you can have extra surveillance there. You can make sure no one takes a digital device in, like a cell phone or a thumb drive. And you can do all the behavioral things that you want. But what it really comes down to is integrity and trust. And while there are a large number of people who have different levels of security clearance, they need to have that in order to do their jobs. But just trying to buckle down on some of the behavioral components in terms of the physical things that can be done to monitor and secure secret documents and things that are important for national security, it really does come down to integrity and trust. Trust in our political leaders, in government institutions, continues to plummet. In fact, some really interesting numbers just coming out. The share of the public that expresses a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in the presidency is down to 26%. Those who have great deal or quite a lot of trust in Congress is down to 8%. Think of that, 8%. Not many things score that low. The Supreme Court is down to 27%. The Supreme Court used to be pretty high on the trust and integrity list when it comes to American citizens. And so when you talk about that kind of lack of trust or loss of trust, that undermines so many things. And we see it play out in our politics. We've seen lapses of integrity in community, business, political leaders. It's all led the country to a place where it's really tough for trust to thrive, and in some places even exist. We've fallen into this moral relativism that's created these shifting sands of, I think, what used to be a really sure foundation in this country of trust and integrity in America. So now we're faced with things like situational honesty, situational leadership, situational ethics. I think all of that is crippling the nation's ability to solve big problems and engage in really important, really crucial conversations in this country. And so while there's lots of complaints about conflict in government, inability to negotiate or compromise, all of those kinds of things that we hit, a lot of those cooperative solutions have to begin with trust. You have to trust the other person's integrity, that they'll actually do what they promise to do. That's how a compromise is formed. But lacking that combination of trust and integrity, leaders are left to focus on what divides them, while accentuating the distrust or really challenging or questioning the motives of those that they might disagree with. That's not good for the country. That's not good for freedom and democracy or a constitutional republic to survive. We have to have integrity and trust. And guess what? That doesn't start in the Pentagon by enforcing rules. It comes with a look in the mirror. Integrity and trust start inside each one of us. And you can go all the way back to George Washington's first inaugural address. He said that he hoped that the foundations of our national policy will be laid in the pure and immutable principles of private morality. He called on free government to exemplify the attributes that will make its citizens proud and command the respect of the world. So the kind of public and private morality, that integrity and trust that George Washington called for in our nation's leader, didn't require him to be perfect, but it did necessitate integrity and congruency, regardless of the situation. No situational leadership, no situational ethics. And I've seen this play out over and over. I've seen it in politics. I've seen it in business. I've seen those people who were incongruent. So the leader who appeared, really kind and caring in public or with customers or clients, but privately they were a tyrant who berated and demeaned subordinates and employees. I've witnessed those who, when interviewed by the media, projected a persona of a refined diplomat or a statesman, but who away from the cameras were crass and crude and profane. And I've also experienced the opposite of that. I've experienced those elected leaders who spoke of openness and transparency and then lived it. And I've seen the flip side of that. Those who talked about openness and transparency and then were constantly behind closed doors making deals. All of those things undermine trust. Trust in the institutions, and sadly, that undermines the trust we have in each other. Often this goes back to something I learned years ago, and that is the old bubblegum test. Integrity is what you do with your bubblegum when nobody's looking. And all you have to do is go to a restaurant counter and look underneath. And you can see those who put their gum underneath the table. Now, I'm not saying that you have to always make it to the garbage can, but there's something about that. I often say that a person is not honest just because they haven't had a chance to lie. A person is honest because they have integrity. and that they're going to do the hard thing regardless of the situation. And when we talk about those who are in public office, again, looking at the atrocious numbers in terms of trust, again, the presidency, only 26% of Americans have a lot of confidence in the presidency. Only 8% have confidence and trust in Congress. Only 27% in the Supreme Court. And it's that undermining of those institutions that worries me. And again, we don't have to have perfect public servants. There are none, to be honest. Everybody's going to fall short. But to me, it's that inescapable trust, that integrity that matters. Whether it's someone at the Pentagon who's handling secure documents, or whether it's one of us interacting with someone in our neighborhood or in our community or in a business negotiation. Integrity and trust matter. And until we get that right, we're going to continue to have a lot of wrongs going on in the country. And that trust, that confidence will continue to erode as we allow integrity